So what I do in the VIP events in person, you'll come with a communication challenge and you're going to plan to have this conversation at some point in the near future, within a week or so. So we script it using all the techniques and the conversational hourglass and everything, rapport building, all this stuff, right? We take everything together and they script out the conversation. So then they brief it to me. Right. Everybody who's working on their own individual challenge will brief me the conversation. And as I listen to Giles' conversation, I'm like, there's something else here. I was like, I don't think that's the real issue, because so I role played with her, played devil's advocate, right? And I challenged her. I was like, okay, well, if you're going to say this to me, this is what I'm going to say back. And she's like, oh, that's not going to get me anywhere. Right. And if you keep hitting those roadblocks in a conversation, getting stuck, where are you going to go? And so when we did this and we tested it out, she's like, that does it. She threw the paper. She's like, I'm starting again because this is a different conversation. And lo and behold, then we really had some good stuff come out of it.
I
Yeah.
have to tell you that one of the things that I didn't anticipate, you know, you would think that somebody that understands our industry is the only person that really could weigh in. And that is not the case, you know. So sitting there, so I did the 2 day VIP, and it was fantastic because it was so much one-on-one time. But even just without you knowing all this stuff about healthcare fraud, you were able to just listen to the conversation that I wanted to have and say, okay, but like if I'm hearing this correctly, it didn't have anything to do with the fact that it was a
Mhm.
completely different industry. It was business. It
Yeah.
was a business scenario. It was a person trying to get information out of another person. It was just that basic. And I think that was the piece that I was shocked. I was like, oh my God, she actually just helped me figure out that if I don't get the answers to these three things in this way, I probably don't want to work with this particular client. And it saved me a ton of time and bad decisions, really. Like it saved me a lot
Yeah.
of time.
Yeah. And while we were doing this, I was listening to a few things that she was saying. And I was like, and I saw the red flags. Like I heard them. I'm like, oh,
Yep.
right. So I'm like, let's figure out another way around. And it's almost sometimes we have an idea in our head and we think it's pretty good and we have rehearsed it, we've practiced it, and we're thinking, no, I know what's going on. I know what the conversation I need to have. I know what I should do. But it's subjective, right? Because we're not getting anybody else's input or anybody else to say, pump the brakes, think of it this way. What about this scenario? And when people do that, you're like, oh, I didn't think
Mhm.
of that. Right. And so,
And that's the important thing. It's like
yeah,
having somebody that can look in versus somebody that's already kind of that understands what's going on.
yeah,
It's just so valuable. So I was there with my business partner and she knew all about the situation we were in. Lena had no clue until we started saying to her, well, this is the situation. And so the red flags were there and you were just like, this is a red flag. This is a red flag. Here's why it's a red flag. You need to ask, you need to get this information. And sure enough, when we started asking the questions, and I used some of
yeah,
the elicitation techniques here,
yeah.
so that I could see if I could get a little bit more information about it. Because one of the questions was, did this individual have the decision-making capability that we needed him to have in order to spend the money we needed him to spend? And we found out he didn't. So, and it's fabulous because I was just like, that saved me an unbelievable amount of time, stress,
Yeah.
effort, all of it. And
Yeah.
so John is asking a question about, did we script the possible objections? And yes, we did. We did. So, and it was helpful to have Lena just kind of like spitballing with us in person, say, what about this? What if he says this? Then what's your response going to be? So scripting the objections was more valuable than I realized it would be because you're right. You come into it with, I know this
Yeah.
industry. I
Yeah.
got this, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and then you plan it out perfectly, but it's like there's one thing that maybe you haven't thought of, and that's what comes up.
Yeah.
So